Chris Mannix for the crossover alongside Rowan Nadkarni and Michael Shapiro. Guys, the Celtics are limping into this offseason, a big one for a team that struggled to meet expectations this year. So, if you're Danny Ainge and that front office, Rohan, what steps do you take to get this team back on track?
Chris, I think it has to all be about finding depth because I think they have the top line talent there to contend and compete with anyone. Jayson Tatum, despite the overall team struggles during the series, has been really good against the Nets. Marcus Smart in many ways is the heart and soul of that team. They're obviously missing Jaylen Brown. I think they've really found something with Robert Williams this year, etc. So I think they have their core there. I think it's all about finding the right pieces around them. We don't have to litigate every single thing that's happened, but I think it's fair to say Danny Ainge has had some trouble hitting on some of those later first-round picks. We're seeing guys like Langford and Neesmith get some playing time during the series, have some moments where they're guys those guys you can really count on moving forward in a playoff series. I really think it's about finding depth, finding more, Evan Fournier types. Not that he's necessarily been their best acquisition, but guys that they can slot in around their core, give them lineup flexibility. Give them minutes where their best players aren't necessarily having to carry the load during a playoff game. So I think it's all about finding depth for Danny Ainge. I don't think this team needs big swings because I'm a really big fan of their core.
Yeah, I think to expect some kind of big pivot here from the Celtics is kind of misguided. I mean, of course, they're not going to trade Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown. I think it could be hard to move Kemba Walker's contract if they're even interested in that. I think it's kind of making moves, as Rohan said, on the margins to kind of make this the most complete and cohesive roster as possible. I think they could really use an addition at the 5. I think Tristan Thompson really was kind of a poor player all year for them. He really struggled in this series. So finding a center, maybe hitting on a late round pick, but I think it's kind of a situation where the Celtics, after all this maneuvering, have found themselves not necessarily stuck, but in a situation where it's going to be hard for them to make big swings on their roster. So I think for Danny Ainge to improve this team going into next year, it's those moves on the margins that's going to lift the Celtics into that top tier in the East.
Yeah, I think you do keep an eye on what's going on in Washington. I think if there's ability to explore a Jaylen Brown, Bradley Beal swap, I think you have to at least consider it because I think Beal would play really well off of Jayson Tatum. And we all know at this point about their relationship, which dates back to their childhood. So I think that's something you have to consider. You have to find a way to figure out this injury issue with Kemba Walker. I mean, he has had lower leg issues for the better part of the last 2 years, and those leg issues have been killing this team. I mean, he has to be out there as the third scorer on the floor, whether it's Tatum and Brown at 1 and 2 or Tatum and Beal. You've got to have Kemba Walker in that position. Other than that, I do agree with Rohan. I think you have to find veteran depth. I'm somewhat optimistic, Rohan, to your point, about some of these young players and their ability to contribute next season. Romeo Langford, who has been on like a milk carton for the first year and a half of his career, showed up a little bit in the second half of the season, showed flashes that maybe he can be a contributing 6th, 7th, and 8th type of player. Same thing with Aaron Neesmith. And look, I warned people that Neesmith was going to take some time to get into the flow because his last season at Vanderbilt ended early because of that foot injury. So it was going to take him some time to get into the rhythm. And I thought he did towards the second half of the season. This guy was a terrific three-point shooter in college basketball and had some terrific three-point shooting nights for the Celtics towards the end of the year. Peyton Pritchard is solid as well. They just need somebody to sort of take that Gordon Hayward role. Not necessarily do everything that Gordon Hayward did, but to be an experienced guy that Brad Stevens can count on. Maybe it's J.J. Redick, somebody you can get at a lower price. Maybe it's somebody else that's out there. It's a pretty strong market for wing players in this offseason. So I think if you find that guy to add to this mix, Rohan, I think you can feel somewhat confident going into next year, a more normal year at the very least, that you're going to have a team that can compete with the top ones in the Eastern Conference.
For sure. I think you made a couple good points there. First of all, the silver lining of kind of this playoff series is the playing time it's afforded guys like Langford and Neesmith, who maybe not would have gotten this much run had the team been fully healthy. Another thing that you touched on, listen, the Celtics were maybe the team most affected by COVID during the regular season. I'm sure someone actually has those stats somewhere. But they've never really had an opportunity to get going with their full lineup this entire regular season. And I'm with you. It's very hard to draw strong conclusions about this team based on what happened this year because I don't think their record reflects their talent, and I think there are, genuine reasons for that. I think they need kind of their version of a. I mean, I'm saying this like this person's easy to acquire, but a Jordan Clarkson or a Joe Ingles type, even like a Royce O'Neal, just that really solid guy who's going to be on the floor in playoff games, can play both ways, won't be played on the floor, can guard multiple positions. I think Jaylen Brown's almost become too important, too good to be that kind of player. That's who he was in the past. I think he's kind of assumed that second star role, obviously. I just think they need that two-way guy who's going to give them, allow Brad Stevens to play different lineups, et cetera, during the playoffs. And I think that's what they really need to kind of unlock this roster.
Look, Jordan Clarkson wasn't supposed to be Jordan Clarkson in Utah. I mean, nobody was jumping up and down in excitement when he was traded from Cleveland to Utah a couple of years ago, but he fit the system, and they found something that works. The Celtics to find a guy that fits their system as well, can have the impact, I agree, that Jordan Clarkson has had on Utah. For more, check us out over at SI.com.